So what happens after you get sober? After you've done the hard work of quitting a substance. Well, in her memoir, Humble Pie, Dana Bowman shows us that quitting is often just act one in a much, much longer and more complicated play. Picture this. Years into her recovery from alcoholism, Bowman is sitting in a diner in North Carolina. She orders a slice of lemon pie, devours it in about 3 seconds flat, and is just left staring at the crumbs, still absolutely ravenous. And that hunger? It wasn't for more food. It was a huge red flag that her addictive behaviors hadn't gone anywhere. They had just found a new home. And this kicks off what she calls sobriety's second act. It's this idea that what you thought was the finish line is actually the starting line for a whole new, unexpected race. So, after her second book gets published, Bowman sees the book tour as the ultimate proof that she'd made it. She had this whole vision of herself as a big, important author. Packed rooms, people hanging on her every word. The feeling of, okay, I finally arrived. But the reality, yeah, it was a little different. And often pretty humbling. She talks about showing up to these book signings and just seeing rows and rows of empty chairs. At one stop, the only 2 people who showed up were the bookstore owner's parents, who, bless their hearts, listened politely and then admitted they weren't even there to buy the book. Ouch. Experiences like that started feeding this quiet, nasty little voice in her head. It was more than just imposter syndrome. It was this deep-seated feeling of being worthless. And the crazy part is, she did have successful events, like a completely packed house at one famous bookstore. But it was the empty chairs that were screaming the loudest in her mind. Which brings us to a really interesting question about how our brains are wired. Why is it that the negative stuff so often feels more powerful than the positive? Let's dig into the science behind this feeling. Seriously, think about it in your own life. Why does one negative comment from someone stick with you all week, but a dozen compliments just kind of fade away after an hour? Bowman's experience is the perfect example. One bad book signing felt more real and more true than a whole room full of applause. Why is that? Well, there's a scientific reason for it. It's called the negativity bias. Our brains are literally hardwired to give more weight, more importance to bad experiences. As Bowman puts it, based on the research, negative thoughts are just chewier. We spend way more mental energy chewing on them, analyzing them, and replaying them over and over again. And it turns out, this tendency, it's called repeated negative thinking, is way more common in certain groups. Research shows that alcoholics, women, and perfectionists are all much more likely to get stuck in these negative thought loops. And Bowman? She identifies as all 3, which basically put her right in the middle of a perfect storm. Now, imagine you're already wrestling with all these internal demons, and then an external crisis hits the entire planet. The pandemic created this absolute pressure cooker for anxiety and addiction. For an introvert in recovery like Bowman, this was a huge problem. The forced quarantine just completely blurred the line between healthy solitude, time you need to recharge, and the dangerous kind of hiding that so often goes hand in hand with addiction. When your coping mechanism is isolation, being told you have to isolate is really treacherous territory. And to make all that stress even worse, society was sending some pretty complicated messages. Get this, 47 out of 50 U.S. states declared liquor stores to be essential businesses. Now, on one hand, that was critical for people with severe dependency to avoid a life-threatening withdrawal. But on the other hand, it meant that during a time of just massive global anxiety, access to alcohol was easier than ever. And the impact was, well, it was exactly what you'd expect. The data showed a huge spike in binge drinking, relapse rates went way up for people in recovery, and tragically, alcohol-related deaths increased across the country. It was a public health crisis layered right on top of another public health crisis. All of this leads to a key realization in the memoir. This struggle with binge eating that popped up during the book tour and the pandemic, it wasn't some brand new problem. It was just the latest chapter in a story that had been going on her whole life. Looking back, Bowman traces this pattern all the way back to junior high and the shame of a gym suit that didn't fit. From there, it was decades of diet pills, Slim Fast, Weight Watchers, you name it. This wasn't some new side effect of sobriety. It was a deep-rooted pattern of trying to control and deprive herself that started years and years before she ever had a problem with alcohol. And this is the book's big aha moment. One day, hiding Snickers wrappers under her mattress, she gets this chilling sense of déjà vu. She realizes the behavior, the secrecy, the shame, that frantic need to consume, it was identical to when she used to hide empty vodka bottles. The only thing that had changed was the substance. The addiction itself was still right there. So, how do you break a cycle like that? One that's been running your entire life? Well, for Bowman, the answer didn't come from a therapist or a meeting. It came from a really ordinary place. All the stress from the tour finally comes to a head, and she gets into a car wreck. It's a literal physical crash that is a perfect mirror for the internal crash she's been going through. She was just exhausted, distracted, and completely running on fumes. A few weeks later, her car starts making this weird, scary, rattling noise. And she does what she's been doing with her anxiety. She ignores it, just hoping it'll magically go away. That scary noise in her car becomes the perfect metaphor for the fear she's been living with, but just refusing to deal with. When she finally gets the courage to take the car to her mechanic, Kevin, she admits she's been terrified to drive it. And he just looks at her and says something so simple but so profound. His words just hit her like a ton of bricks. It clicked. She wasn't just driving scared. For the past years, she had been living scared. And really, that's the final question the story leaves us with. It's an invitation to listen for those weird noises in our own lives, those anxieties and fears we try to ignore, hoping they'll just fix themselves. Bowman's journey is a powerful reminder that true recovery isn't just about stopping one thing. It's about finally finding the courage to ask for help with the things that scare us the most.